In this video, we're going to look at UFC Vegas 71. I'll give you my final picks. We'll go deep into DraftKings strategy, and I'm going to give you what I'm calling an unlimited money glitch because those of you that have been taking advantage have been making some kashish. As always, you can call me Kunath. Let's make some money this week. Apologies for not being able to get the predictions video out to you. I did harm myself earlier in the week, but now I feel a lot better. The predictions, as well as the official bets, DraftKings strategy guide, projections, models, and all of that good stuff is on KunathMMA.com. Feel free to go there, find the plan that works best for you, start taking advantage of these tools and connecting with the community that's continuing to grow. But again, we are back. I do feel a lot better. I went all the way down to Australia in the last couple of days. They pumped me full of kangaroo stem cells, so now my lower body's feeling bouncy. We're feeling good. As the most athletic content creator in this space, it's my duty to stay in good health so I can stay on top. And at 55 years old, sometimes you have these limitations that you find out about a little too late, but we're here, we're ready, and we can get right into the value plays this week. For those of you that are new, value plays are plays on DraftKings at 8,000 salary and below, underdogs if you will, that you will need in your lineups to make everything work salary-wise, and there are a few spots that I really like this week. Let's go. Our first value play is Karol Rosa. She's coming in at 7,900, and I love her in this matchup this week. I really like the output from Karol Rosa. We've seen in her past fights her throw 160 strikes, 92, 145, 137, 177. She's putting 177 out there in her debut as well.
Beautiful shots.
That kind of volume is leading to these high DraftKings scores, and I could see her doing something like that this week. In fights that she's winning in the UFC, she's averaging 105 DraftKings points. That's DK gold. In 4 out of her 6 UFC fights, she has ended up on the optimal lineup on DraftKings, and she could do it again this week because Norma Dumont, for as talented as she is, she does tend to let minutes slip by. I worry that Norma Dumont's going to do a lot of looking in the mirror. She's going to get caught with volume. She's going to be reacting more than being proactive, and while she's getting pieced up, these minutes are slipping by and she's losing rounds as a result. And this is up at 145 pounds. I think this is a great move for Karol Rosa because she's not going to be drained. She's going to be stronger. She's going to be faster, and she's going to feel better. My one worry for Karol Rosa this week is that she finds herself in bottom position and Norma Dumont doesn't let her back up. We've seen Karol Rosa taken down and held down before, most recently by Sarah McMahon. McMahon was able to take her down and keep her there for most of the fight. It wasn't until the 3rd round where Karol Rosa really turned it on, really started fighting, and she could have won that fight if she kept the pressure on or at least started earlier. She corrected that in a big way against Lena Landsberg, and I think she's going to maintain that form this week. She picks up a win by decision but scores a lot of points in the process. That's the other impressive piece of what she's been able to do in her run in the UFC. There's no finishes, and she's still scoring north of 100 DraftKings points. So you know she's going to fight for your money. You know she's going to put a lot out there, and I like her to win this matchup, and she's one of my favorite value plays and favorite underdogs of the week. Now our next value play is in a tough matchup. We've got Matthew Semelsberger coming in at 7,800. He's fighting Jeremiah Wells, and that's a tough dude. Jeremiah Wells is a big, strong guy. His back is as wide as the television in my living room, but Matt Semelsberger is not only a good fighter, but he's an elite athlete, and I think the fighting is starting to catch up with the athleticism, and he's looking real good.
That boy is good.
Last time out, he put the absolute beats on Jake Matthews, who looked career best against Andre Fiallo the fight prior to. So if the same Jake Matthews showed up, which I think he did, Matt Semelsberger blanked him. And it was truly a complete performance. 3 knockdowns, 3 takedowns, almost 5 minutes of control time. He did whatever he wanted in that fight against a very tough, talented, and experienced Jake Matthews. Now on the other side of the matchup, Jeremiah Wells is no joke, and you might need one side of this matchup because Jeremiah Wells throws with a ton of power. We saw last time out he starched Court McGee, and I remember on that video specifically, so many people were telling me how crazy I was for thinking that he was going to starch Court McGee. Basically did it with the first clean punch that he landed. The dude's power is stupid, and that's because he's throwing everything into his punches. He has that kind of power, and that's also how he fights just overall. Even when he's grappling, it's a lot of muscling, a lot of strength, not a whole lot of finesse, more just brute force. But when you're built like the Tasmanian Devil and you have that natural athleticism, somebody like Jeremiah Wells can get away with that, and he can actually get away with that for 3 rounds, which makes him very tough. His run in the UFC, it's been really impressive. He's 6-2 in the UFC, and he has 7 takedowns as well as 7 knockdowns, which shows the well-roundedness of his game. We've seen him win multiple fights inside of a minute, and we've also seen him score well on DraftKings, even in a decision. The fights that he's losing, Chaos Williams, he loses as an underdog there in a decision, able to deal with the power of Chaos Williams, which is really saying something, and that's going to serve him well this week. And then against Alex Morono, he got worked for the first 2 rounds, but then he dug deep deep and was winning the third round. So a lot to like about Matt Semelsberger this week. I do like him as a value play. I don't like him as much as somebody like Karol Rosa, but I do think that he has more finishing upside, especially early finishing upside, and I think he can score a lot of points this week even if it went to a decision. Our next value play is our main event underdog. We have Sergei Pavlovich. He's fighting Curtis Blaydes, and he has to be considered when you're talking about value plays because of that one-shot knockout power. Sergei Pavlovich comes to the UFC, drops his debut to Alistair Overeem. Let's take that out for a second and look at his run since then. 5 wins, 5 knockouts, all in the first round, and 82% of his wins are by first round knockout. If you look at his DraftKings scoring, 144, 131, 109, 109, 107, that averages out across those 5 fights to 120 DraftKings points. I haven't seen that many points since I looked at my mom's license. And what's more is one of the more impressive pieces of this is when you look here, it's 1 knockdown, 1 knockdown, 1 knockdown, 1 knockdown, and then 2 against Tai Tuivasa. But for most of these, it's only 1.
When I knock people out, they don't fucking move.
Shout out Jeremy Stevens. And if you've been following me on Twitter for a while, you know that when this fight was announced, I had different feelings at first. And if you're not following me on Twitter, please do, at KunathMMA. Thank you. When the fight was announced, the knee-jerk reaction was Curtis Blaydes going to put the man on his back, he's going to elbow him into oblivion, and he's probably going to finish him in the first or second round. That is still very much on the table, but when you go back and watch these Sergei Pavlovich fights, and it's not a lot of work because they're pretty short, he's doing something that surprises me beyond just looking at the numbers. So going into it, when you look at the numbers, you think, well, all these guys are not really trying to take him down and they're standing right in front of him. But it's not until you watch the tape when you understand the full story, and here's what it is. When you look at power punchers, and we'll use somebody like Derek Lewis as a perfect example, most knockouts in the UFC, same weight class, biggest power we've ever seen outside of maybe Francis Ngannou, but it rivals that power. When you see power punchers like that, they're typically plodding forward, right? They're waiting for the right opportunity. And then once you give them that opening, they uncork something big and it's a knockout shot. But here's the thing with Sergei Pavlovich, he's more active. The reason why guys stand right in front of Sergei Pavlovich is because they get frozen because of his movements and his feints. He's not plodding forward like this and waiting. He's moving, his head's moving, his hands are moving, he's ready to go. It's overwhelming, guys. It's too much information. I almost liken it to Jose Aldo. Sometimes when Jose Aldo starts opening up, you see his eyes get big, the hands start moving, he's ripping to the body and upstairs. But that's largely against featherweights, and you see featherweights deal with it well because Jose Aldo's not going to knock him dead with one punch, and they're fast enough to get out of the way. But in the heavyweight division, when Sergei Pavlovich starts coming downhill, you see these guys get twitchy defensively, and they don't know what to do. And that's why he's having so much success, because he's got a ton of power, and he's also giving these guys a lot to think about as he's closing distance. And I think that Curtis Blaydes gets overwhelmed by that movement this week. And Curtis Blaydes has been trying to strike lately, and it's been working for him. But this isn't Chris Daukaus. This isn't Tom Aspinall, who hurt himself. This is Sergei Pavlovich, who needs to land one shot. And we've seen Curtis Blaydes lose to Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou twice. Big power is his kryptonite. This guy has big power. One of the better value plays this week, one of the higher scoring ceilings this week when you consider the knockout upside, the first round upside, and the quick win upside. Great value on Sergei Pavlovich. And to stick with the theme of power, we have Bruno Silva. He is fighting Brad Tavares this week, and I love this as a buy low spot for Bruno Silva. He comes into the UFC, picks up 3 knockout wins. He smoked Wellington Turman. He came back to knock out Andrew Sanchez after a grueling first 2 rounds, and then he knocked out Jordan Wright in the first round. He gets matched up with Alex Pereira, goes toe-to-toe with him, actually gives him a tough fight. He has some success in that fight, but then he follows that up with a career worst performance against Gerald Meerschaert. So how does this all work? At the risk of sounding like I'm making an excuse for Bruno Silva, he might have just not had it that night. He might have went in there thinking, well, I'm going to knock out Gerald Meerschaert probably in the first exchange or with the first couple of clean punches that I land. That's all we all thought. We all believed that. But then that didn't happen, and it seemed he was off. He didn't throw many strikes, and he typically isn't throwing a ton of strikes, but he really didn't let his hands go in that fight, and you really couldn't understand why. He was also coming off his first career loss in the UFC, so there might have been a little bit of a hangover there, and Blindado just did not look like himself. But now we can get this true knockout artist at 7,300 against Brad Tavares, who is not knocking people out. Brad Tavares is going to be there for all 3 rounds, and he's going to have 15 minutes of opportunity to get knocked out this week. Brad Tavares has been chin-checked multiple times in the past. He's been knocked out multiple times in the past, and he's coming off of loss to Dricus du Plessis, where he ate over 100 significant strikes. But Silva's not going to do that. Silva's going to walk him down. He's going to make him circle into his power, and he's going to touch him a lot harder than somebody like Dricus du Plessis touched him, and he might put him down. When we have the opportunity to roster somebody with shocking one-shot knockout power like Bruno Silva, we want to take it, especially down at this price. I like him this week, not only as a value play, but to win this fight as well. If he comes out looking anything like he did against Gerald Meerschaert, then you probably just tell him to pack his bags. We don't need to see him fight in the UFC for all that much longer, but I do think that this is a good spot to buy low, because if this was a fight that was made right after the Alex Pereira fight, you would probably see Bruno Silva as the favorite. But he had that bad performance against GM3 that pulls down his price, so this is a good buy low spot for Bruno Silva, in my opinion, who I like to get back on track this week and get back to his knockout ways. And our final value play is a tale as old as time. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know how this goes. If the books want to keep giving us Priscila Cachoeira at underdog money, then be my guest. Our girl Priscila Cash as an underdog has come through multiple times for us in the past. She smoked Ariane Lipski last time out. She beat Jiyeon Kim by really putting it on her in the third round. And the cool thing about Priscila Cachoeira is, if you look, she comes into the UFC. She fights Valentina Shevchenko. I believe that was on short notice. Got absolutely smoked, and there's no shame in that. Valentina is one of the best we've ever seen. Follows that up with a loss to Molly McCann. Follows that up with a loss to Luana Carolina. So you start your UFC career 0-3. Not great. Since then, she's gone 4-1, really putting together a strong UFC career and a strong resume, also knocking women dead. She's punching with as much power as anybody in the division, maybe more than anybody in the division, and this week she's got Karine Silva, who is used to having things go her way. Karine Silva is coming off a UFC debut win where she looked good, maybe less than dominant, but she looked good, picked up a first round finish, but she's never won a fight by decision. If we know anything about Priscila Cachoeira, is that she's going to fight for your money, especially late. So if this gets into the third round and you see Karine Silva start to fade a little bit, Priscila Cachoeira is going to stay in her face, she's going to throw those elbows, she's going to throw those big hooks, and she's probably going to knock her dead. The line for this fight to not go the distance sits at -250, so the books know that this fight probably is not going to see the judges' scorecards. I don't think it will either with the way that these women fight, and I'm going to want a piece of this underdog action, especially because Priscila is taking care of the boys. So give me Priscila Cachoeira at 7,100 as an excellent value play this week when it comes to your tournaments. And now we can get into building some lineups. We'll start with cash games, we'll move on to tournament lineups, and if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, comment something for the algorithm, all great and free ways to support the channel. And if you want to take it a step further, go ahead and share this video with somebody who may have not seen the channel before, or somebody who's going to be watching the fights this week. All of that is very appreciated and helps a ton. Now we'll get into the cash game builds for this week. It's an interesting week for cash because you have the main event. Now the main event is tough because it's not one that you want to stack. And I say that because this fight probably doesn't exceed 2 rounds, and I don't want to be on the wrong side of it with my cash game. So I'm not going to roster Curtis Blaydes, and I'm not going to roster Sergei Pavlovich either. A spot that I really want to get to this week would be Montel Jackson at 9,700. Now you do like to build in the insurance, and you do want to stack. So you start to look through these fights and try to figure out which of these fights probably go the distance, and as a situation where both guys can score pretty well. And this is where I really like Bobby Green to be stacked with Jared Gordon this week. Jared Gordon 6,800, Bobby Green is 9,400. Again, if you've watched us for a while, you know the math always shakes out the same when you're stacking fights. So you stack this fight instead of the main event because the likelihood of this going the distance is a lot better than the main event. So you have Bobby Green here, who is throwing a ton of strikes. He's coming off a loss to Drew Dober where he was absolutely piecing up Drew Dober and testing that historically amazing chin of Drew Dober. So I do think that a knockout is on the table for Bobby Green this week. If not, he's just going to piece up Jared Gordon. He loses his fight on short notice to Islam Makhachev. Before that, who cares? But before that, you've got the fight with Nasrat Haqparast, lands almost 200 significant strikes. In a decision, he wins 105 DraftKings points for you, shows up on the optimal lineup that night. Before that, he absolutely smokes Ally Aquinta in the first round, knocks him down, scores 112 DraftKings points with that first round finish. Goes toe-to-toe with Fiziev, scores 57 points in a loss, 53 points in a loss against Thiago Moises in a fight that he should have won. Beat up Alan Patrick, almost 100 points, 111 points against Lando Venata. A lot to like against Bobby Green, especially against a very hittable Jared Gordon. And then on the other side, you have Jared Gordon, who, I mean, he's lost 58 points right there against Paddy Pimblett in a loss, 40 points against Grant Dawson in a loss. So as long as he's not getting knocked out early, he probably is going to score a decent amount of points as a loser at 6,800 this week. You love that, and I do think that is probably the stack that makes the most sense. Montel Jackson, I'll just touch on why he's in the lineup. He's the biggest favorite on the card, and it's for real good reason. Look at the knockdowns here. Look at the takedowns. He's got huge advantages when it comes to height, reach. You've seen him score 148, 131, 116. He's really DraftKings gold consistently, and I think that he smokes Rani Yahya this week. Now we have just over 8,000 left per fighter, so we're going to have to come down here. We're going to have to grab another underdog. When I look at the landscape here, I don't like Rani Yahya. I think Brogan Walker has a decent chance of going the distance, but she didn't really do all that much in her last fight, scoring 24 DraftKings points. I don't love that. Gomis, I think that he's going to get taken down with ease this week. I don't really love having him in the lineup. I'm just going to go with Priscila Cachoeira and hope that she gives us a tough fight, at least makes it to the second round and scores a decent amount of points. I'm going to come here to Karol Rosa at 7,900 because I do think that she wins and she typically scores a lot of points. And now we have 9,100 left over. That can get us up to the likes of Karine Silva and Ricky Glenn. You've got Brad Tavares here, Curtis Blaydes. I'm really not interested in this range. Karine Silva, because I have Priscila Cachoeira, I do think that you probably need the winner of this matchup. Do not sleep on this one. Ricky Glenn, we've seen him win fights and not score that many points. I don't love him this week, even against Christos Giagos in a matchup where he should be able to get the victory. Brad Tavares, you look at him scoring 75 points, 56 points in a win. I'm really not all that interested. Curtis Blaydes, I'm staying away from that main event. The variance is too high. That leads me to Batgerel, who I like this week because I don't think that Brady he stand is going to be able to stand with him. I think I put this on the site. Brady he can't stand because he seems to get wobbled every time he tries to. Batgerel coming at a fight ready is going to be able to keep his feet. He's going to land with that power, and I think the Storm gets his knockout this week. We've left 400 salary on the table. We've avoided the main event. We have a nice stack with Bobby Green, Jared Gordon. We have Priscila Cachoeira as our punt play. We want Karol Rosa as an underdog to come through, and we're looking for a knockout from Dana. I like this lineup. This makes sense for cash. Now we could take a look at tournament lineups and what we need to do to be successful in tournaments. So obviously we're going to run some of these with the value plays that we looked at before, so we'll start there. I know a lot of people are probably going to run Sergei Pavlovich this week. I think more people actually run Pavlovich than Curtis Blaydes this week. It might not be the case because Curtis Blaydes is coming in at a higher price point and people tend to flock to the higher priced fighter, specifically when it comes to the main event. But I do think that Sergei Pavlovich is probably the better bet there at 7,400. This puts us way below budget, so let's start building this out with some of the value plays that we talked about before. Let's go with Matthew Semelsberger. Let's throw Karol Rosa in there. We've got 89.66 per fighter left over. I like Batgerel Dana. We've got 9,100 left over. Now I'm probably going to come down here to somebody like Justin Tafa. This is Junior Tafa. Oscar, if you're going to write the script and you can't get the fighters' names right, I'm going to knee you in the chest. 10,000 left over. I wonder what we'll do with all this money. Oh, really hard for me to believe that Montel Jackson's not going to show up on the optimal lineup. If Zach Cummins shows up on the optimal lineup at 9,600, I need to go with Montel Jackson this week. We talked about all of these fighters so far outside of Junior Tafa. I just think that Mohammed Usman's not very good. Junior Tafa's coming to get a knockout. That's what he's looking to do. He's going to throw more strikes than Mohammed Usman. Mohammed Usman just kind of lets the fight come to him, does a lot of holding guys up against the cage, and I just don't like his fighting style. And I think that if he does sit back like he did last time, because this is kickboxing Junior Tafa. This isn't Zach Pauga, who's essentially tossing marshmallows underhand at your chin. This is Junior Tafa, who's looking to take your head off. I like this lineup. I don't see what I would change about this. You've left 300 salary on the table. I like this. This is fine. Another direction you can go, because I do think a lot of people will go to Montel Jackson, even though it's hard not to, is you could take Bobby Green, hoping that he scores a lot of points. Francis Marshall's really interesting as well because Gomis is going to get taken down. I just don't see how he's able to keep his feet against Francis Marshall this week. 78.50 left over. I'd probably go right back to Pavlovich. I'll take Bruno Silva. I'll take Cachoeira. I've got 9,600 left over. I can come all the way up here to Iasmin Lucindo, or I could grab somebody like Ricky Glenn. But if this was the case, I'd probably just go back to Batgerel Dana. Left 900 salary on the table. I'm cool with this. If you wanted to get a little different, you could spend more salary, grab Lucindo. No one's looking to play Yasmin Lucindo this week. And before you go, oh, women's MMA, I don't want to play women's MMA, listen up. Last week you needed Denise Gomes. As greasy as it was, you needed Denise Gomes. Last week you needed Jillian Robertson. Did Pierre Rodriguez tap? Of course not. We were all watching. But you needed her in your lineup. So just something to consider. Even a couple of weeks ago, Holly Holm was somebody who you needed in your lineup. So everybody that always says, oh, women's MMA, just because you've been getting it wrong lately, and I understand, understand. It's hard to get right. The judges couldn't even get it right last week when Lucy Pudilova won every round and then Jocelyn Edwards was given a decision. Just because you've struggled to predict the women's MMA fights correctly, myself included, does not mean that you exclude them from your player pool, because they're kicking your ass every week. I know a lot of you out there understand that, but there are a lot of people out there also who don't understand that, who think, oh, well, I haven't got women's MMA right, so I just won't play them, and then they find themselves looking up at the leaderboard as somebody who put 2 women in their lineup. We talk about this all the time. You don't just want to play the people that you like to play or that you want to play or that the people online tell you to play. You have to play somebody who sometimes you don't think about playing, because 9 times out of 10 you find yourself looking up at people and thinking, damn, I wouldn't have even thought to play that guy. So just keep that in mind. Like, do not be afraid to get weird, to get different. If I had to change this lineup, like if you sent this lineup to me, I probably would take Iasmin Lucindo out, and I would go up to somebody like Montel Jackson. I would take Bobby Green out, and then I'd come down here to one of these fighters here. I'd probably go right back to Dana. And Oscar just let me know that I just talked about Iasmin Lucindo being in your lineup and getting different, and then I just took her out. Yeah, thank you for that. Actually, that's really helpful. Next time, text it to me, because you're interrupting the recording and you're pissing me off. So let's say we take Francis Marshall out. Let's say we put Iasmin Lucindo in there. So this is interesting, because now you've taken the 2 most expensive fighters on the slate. You've got Montel Jackson, you've got Lucindo, and you've also left salary on the table. That's something that a lot of people are not going to be doing this week, because they won't be able to. They won't be able to stomach the idea of playing somebody like Priscila Cachoeira and Bruno Silva to be able to make this work. Nearly half of the field is going to play Curtis Blaydes, which means that this lineup probably doesn't work unless you move some things around. I'll show you what that would look like. So let's say we took Pavlovich out. You have to take Bakary Dana out. We get Curtis Blaydes at 8,800. That leaves 7,600 left over. And now you're probably left with somebody like Brady Heastand, since we took Dana Bakary out. This is something to consider as well. Now I'll give you some more looks with Curtis Blaydes here. So let's blow this up. Let's go to the big man himself at 8,800 and see what we can build around him. Let's say we went with somebody like Junior Tafa, we went with Karol Rosa, we went with Matt Semelsberger, and we just tried to kind of stick to the mid-range here. So it's going to be a little difficult. We're going to have to come down here and grab another underdog. Let's say we went with Bruno Silva, and then we came up here to Montel Jackson at 9,700. I'm cool with this. If you have questions about your cash lineups or your tournament lineups, you can always send them on KunathMMA.com. You can also work with the other people on the website through the community tab. That's what it's there for. But those are a couple of looks for you this week when it comes to your cash games, when it comes to your tournaments, and I wish you all the best of luck with that. And we will conclude with, again, what I'm calling the unlimited money glitch, because for the last couple of weeks this has been hitting, and even last week I gave you a can't miss parlay here, giving you 6 times on whatever amount of money you put in there, and it hit like that. This is with the help of our friends over at Underdog Fantasy, who are going to give you a 100% deposit match up to $100 on your first deposit if you use promo code Kunath, or you go through the link that will be in the description and in a pinned comment. I'm going to give you here another can't miss slip. I will give you another 3, so you could go 6x on your money. Let's take a look. This week your can't miss slip is going to be Montel Jackson, 51.55 fantasy points. You've got Dana Bakary lower than 58.5 significant strikes, and then Francis Marshall lower than 48.5 significant strikes. You go ahead and place that for $10. You make 60. You go ahead and take your $10 that you put in there. They hit you with the deposit match. You just double up on it. You've got a 120 payout, and you're happy. You're good. If you do have any kind of ideas when it comes to Underdog, you can send me a message on Twitter. I'd be happy to talk to you on Twitter about Underdog Fantasy and the entries that you can place, the entries that you're iffy about. I'd love to talk to you about that. I'd love to give you some pointers if you need. But if you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for your patience during the week while we were working out some things. I really do appreciate that as well. I wish you the best of luck this week, and I will see you next time.